Cosmic Proverbs 1 to a tale told on the rim worlds. The year is 327 after contact. Humanity has scattered to the edge of the Orion Arm, chasing gold, water, and freedom the same way our ancestors once chased it across the American plains. Out here, past the last Navy patrol beacon. The only law that still holds is the one carved into the oldest scroll we ever carried off Earth, the Book of Proverbs, chapter 12. This is the story of one season on the dust-choked mining moon called Kinnereth 4, and of the people who learned some the easy way, most the hard way, that the words of a 3,000-year-old shepherd king still rule the stars. Marshal Callan Reeve rode into New Gilead on a patched-up hover skiff that coughed blue plasma every time it hit thermals. He wore the same weather-beaten duster his grandfather had worn on Mars, and the same quiet certainty in his eyes. Folks said he carried no sidearm heavier than a stun rod, yet no claim jumper had ever outdrawn him. That was because Callan lived the first line of the scroll the way most men breathe. Whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid. Callan never stopped learning. Every night he sat under the orange sodium lamps of the sheriff's office and studied old case files, or refinery schematics, even the poetry of alien traders who passed through. When a greenhorn deputy asked why a lawman needed poetry, Callan answered, because half the fights out here start with somebody feeling disrespected. Words are cheaper than bullets and twice as fast. Across the street, in the loudest saloon on the moon, a man named Dax Varn ran the opposite play. Dax had struck iridium just 6 months earlier and spent every credit on neon, liquor, and hired muscle. He mocked anyone who quoted scripture, regulations, or common sense. The scroll had a name for Dax. A wicked man earns deceptive wages, but he who sows righteousness gets a true reward. Dax's wages looked real enough until the assay office discovered his. Iridium was mostly full as tungsten, seeded with a few real grains. The market crashed overnight. His muscle walked off with his last crates of whiskey, and Dax was left holding an empty claim deed and a loaded pistol he was too proud to turn on himself. Meanwhile, in the hydroponic domes on the South Ridge, an old woman named Miriam Hawley grew tomatoes the size of softballs in red dust that should have killed anything softer than a cactus. Every surplus fruit she carried to town and gave away. People asked why she didn't sell them for the fortune they'd fetch. Miriam just smiled and kept working. The scroll explained her harvest long before she was born. The righteous man regards the life of his animal, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Miriam's animals were the hungry kids, the burned-out miners, the off-duty marshals who hadn't tasted anything fresh in a year. She regarded their lives, and the domes kept blooming. One dawn, a teenage claim runner named Jonah stole a skimmer and tried to jump Miriam's water tanks for his own failing plot. He crashed the skimmer into her main pump. Water worth more than blood out here gushed across the dust and vanished. Jonah waited for the whip or the airlock or whatever frontier justice Miriam could muster. Instead, she handed him a wrench and said, "Help me fix it, and we'll call it square." Jonah worked beside her for 30 straight hours. When the pump coughed back to life, Miriam pressed a sack of tomatoes into his arms and told him to take them to his motherless twins living in the Hab trailers. Years later, Jonah, now foreman of the largest honest co-op on Kinnereth, still told anyone who'd listen, "There is one who scatters, yet increases all the more. And there is one who withholds what is justly due, yet it results only in want." The biggest storm of the season came the week Dax Varn's creditors arrived with rail rifles and a foreclosure notice. They planned to strip his worthless mine and sell the equipment for scrap. Dax, drunk and desperate, wired the whole shaft with mining charges. One spark and half the settlement would become a crater. Callan Reeve rode out alone. He left his stun rod on the skiff and walked into the mine with nothing but a lantern and the scroll open in his hand. Dax met him at the bottom, shaking finger on the dead man's switch. Callan didn't raise his voice. He simply read aloud the line that had guided him across 3 star systems. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a good word makes it glad. Then he told Dax the truth. The creditors had already agreed to restructure the debt if Dax surrendered peacefully. The explosion would only murder innocents and guarantee his own name was cursed on every colony from here to Proxima. Dax wept like a child, dropped the switch, and walked out into the sunrise with his hands in the air. The scroll had one more line for that morning. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. By the end of that year, Miriam's tomatoes fed half the moon. Jonah's co-op paid triple wages and never shorted a share. Callan pinned a new deputy star on a former claim jumper who'd once tried to kill him. And Dax Varn, after 6 months breaking rocks on the prison asteroid, came home quiet, sober, and took a job repairing the water pump he'd once tried to steal. On the night the twin sons of Kinneray set in perfect alignment, an event that only happens once. Every 33 years, the whole settlement gathered in the square. Miriam had planted with the first seeds she'd saved. Children ran between the tables. Old enemies shared the same bottle. Someone started singing. High above them, the stars burned cold and indifferent, exactly as they had the day Solomon first wrote the words. But down on the dusty ground, under sodium lamps and string lights, the frontier had learned what the scroll already knew. The way of the wicked will perish, but in the path of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death. And out here on the rim of everything, that was still enough. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge. The rest is just noise echoing in vacuum. End of transmission.